On to our next speaker, Jakob Pagter from the Alexandra Institute, who will tell us about how to fight current threats using classical security virtues. So now we are in a solution mode, as I understand.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for coming.
Thanks. Yeah, supposedly we're in a solution mode, I think. So Henning from Rikke, they lured me into this, saying, oh, we have this very nice conference and we have some great people, Bruce Nyer and Mikko Hyppinen, who will be telling all about the current threats. Can you please come and tell everybody how to handle that? And I was, so I was saying, yeah, sure, I can do that. No problem, of course. Well, as you all know, 20 minutes, they go by quickly when everybody's laughing at you, so I'm going to give it my best shot. I think maybe you'll be a bit disappointed because I'm not going to give you solutions. I'm going to point to ideas and strategies. I looked in my SISP book and saw what are we doing there and what are the types of things that you maybe need to consider looking into. So the first thing you need when you do security, you need to realize is that there is no silver bullet, right? There's no solution which will solve all your problems. Basically, security is hard. It's very hard to make secure systems. I think, for instance, the Snowden case shows that this is certainly the case. An organization like the NSA is not able to maintain a lot of their very sensitive secrets. So I think that's a very good point in the case. I also agree to some of the first talks that I think, there's an infrastructural problem, there's a political problem, but I'm not so much going to go into that. At the Alexandra Institute, we have a focus on helping small and medium-sized businesses, and think their focus is doing the business right now, not what they can do in 2 or 5 or 10 years when we fix the infrastructure, but what they can do today and what they cannot do today. So don't get me wrong, I think that intelligence agencies from various countries spying on citizens and companies is a problem, but I don't think that I can give you solutions today here that you can take home and you can implement them and then it's okay. So you expected that? Well, sorry. So what I will do is talk about short-term strategies. I'll give you some examples about some projects that we're working on, and then I will look at things, as I said, from a business perspective. So, that being said, let's consider one thing before I move on, namely metadata, which is maybe the one thing which is not only relevant for companies, but it always starts out as something which is relevant for personal individuals. And if you look at some of these statements, these are really good examples of what metadata is. I think sometimes when we talk about it, it's cookies, it's records of our phone callings, and the EFF made these very nice examples that perhaps you could spend half a minute to read. And see, this is metadata. This is the type of information which is being gathered in mass surveillance. Right? This is the type of information about you and me which is being put out there. This is also a problem for companies. Right? If a company is making a phone call to another company, then there's a record of that. It's not just for individuals. All these examples are for individuals, but the same thing holds for persons or for companies. Another thing, which is not on this slide, but social networks, stuff like Facebook and Google Plus and Twitter and whatnot, all of these things will leave traces. So how can you avoid that? Basically, I'll argue you can't. You can stop using your cell phone, you can stop calling people, and you can stop using Facebook. I don't think it's not going to work for most of us. For myself, for instance, in terms of social networks, there are certain types of information that I have a kind of personally restricted policy about. That could be information about my health. I think Facebook is a gold mine for insurance companies, so I'm not going to give them my data about my health unless, I get something back. So right now, I'm making $17 for Google a year. This is where I draw the line. In insurance, maybe they have it anyway, I don't know. But I mean, there's a certain line, but I think from a practical perspective and as a business, if you want your employees to use Facebook, you want them to use Twitter or whatever, I mean, there's only so much you can do about this type of problem. Okay. So, anyway, when I looked at some of my security education, this is a classical security virtue. This is doing risk analysis. So you look at your company, you look at your assets, and you see what kind of threats are you affected by, and what is the impact if something goes wrong, and what is the probability that somebody will be successful with this. I think this is maybe it's a bit complicated to talk about here. So instead, I'm gonna have this pass a bit simpler picture. Where you do, in a company, for instance, you can follow the guidance from Dansk Industri, which has a nice guidance on how that you should do data classification. So you look at your company, you look at your data, and you see, okay, do I have any type of very sensitive data? And then you consider, okay, who are my opponents? Who wants to get hold of this data? Is it competitors? Is it nobody? Is it a bunch of high school kids who found some virus on the internet or bought it? Or is it because I'm worried about mass surveillance? I just argued that maybe then you really need to, then your options are perhaps limited. Or is it because you're afraid of national intelligence agencies and stuff like that, as we saw in the first two talks today? So, I mean, you need to find out where you are in this spectrum. So one thing that, how many here knows Occam's razor? So this is kind of a philosophical ad hoc rule about what kinds of systems you should, what kind of conclusions you should believe in. So basically it says that you should always choose or believe in the solution or system which has the fewest assumptions. So what you could argue is that the Snowden case, before the Snowden case, thinking about mass surveillance and national intelligence agencies as threat agents towards a small Danish company. This would, I mean, you would have to do a lot of assumptions about conspiracy theories and whatnot, and you would kind of, people would think of you as a person running around with a tinfoil hat. So today, this is not the case anymore. I think everybody now thinks that for many companies, this is a real threat. The question is only whether they have information which is actually of interest to these different agents. So, so what do you do? Yeah, so you can take this very classical security approach. You can cut the internet wire, and then, you know, as we say, a secure computer is one that's not on the internet. I read somewhere in The Guardian that Bruce Nair had some of his documents on an air-gapped computer, where he would move them back and forth in a very special USB stick and whatnot. And this is something you could do. This, you can take all your information off the grid, so to speak. Still, you need to have input and output out of that platform. You can have closed networks, but you may still need to communicate with the world around you. So at the same point you do that, you become vulnerable to all kinds of standard viruses, trojans, and whatnot. Of course, there are people that are arguing that you should use low complexity formats like text files instead of word files or whatnot, because then it's harder to hide backdoors in them. But yeah, I don't know. Still, and even if you manage to do so, then there are a lot of ways to attack air-gapped computers. I mean, there are a lot of built-in wireless capabilities. You need to verify the hardware. Did somebody modify it during its transfer with the postal service to you? And so on and so forth. I mean, there are examples of acoustic side channels where you listen on the high frequencies of the CPU from a smartphone which is in the vicinity of the computer, and then you can learn information about what is on it. There are all these types of things. And I think, so, I mean, this is not something that's going to work. I mean, if you're a small Danish company and you want to protect yourself, and this is the type of, and you really think that the NSA or the Chinese intelligence agency or somebody else is trying to target you and your computer and get into that, then you're facing an uphill battle. I think it's going to be very, very hard. So you really need to, if you go back to risk analysis, you really need to consider, is that really where I am? Is that really my situation? Because if that is your situation, then it's going to be very expensive for you to protect yourself. Okay, so that didn't work. So we encrypt everything. It's great. We work with at the Alexandra Institute, work a lot with cryptography. It's a great solution. So, but I mean, it's only as good as the people using it, right? And the people building it. So I think certainly cryptography, even though I'd like to sell you a lot of crypto stuff and a lot of, but I mean, it's no silver bullet either. It's a part of a security strategy, but in the end, even if you have good security, if you cannot protect the key which is used to decrypt your material, then you are in as tough a spot as you started out with. I think for big companies like IBM, they can enforce rigorous regimes and policies and really make their employees do that and have the necessary PKI infrastructure and whatnot. But for small companies that want to communicate internally and with customers, then it's much harder, right? Because you need to have all the tools in place. Also, even if you encrypt everything, it deals with the case of transporting and storing data. What happens when you use it? When you use your data, you need to decrypt it to work with it on your computer, on your air-gapped machine, on your regular machine, in your cloud service or wherever. I mean, encrypting data only goes so far. And also, but I think, and one of the positive things about cryptography is, and I think it was nice that in his talk about the math, the crypto is not broken. What is broken is implementations, it's some of the standards that have been affected, but the underlying mathematics and so on and so forth still holds. So if you're doing crypto and you're doing it right, then it really raises the bar in terms of protecting you both against intelligence agencies and against mass surveillance. I would say though that, I mean, you see a lot of examples of people doing crypto solutions. For instance, some of you may know Dropbox. It's a very nice solution. I use it myself. And at some point they claim that we encrypt all your data, so we can't see it. And it's true, they encrypt it. Actually, it's encrypted when it leaves your machine using SSL, and then it ends up in Dropbox's service, which is not really Dropbox's service because they're running on Amazon Web Services. But then it's decrypted there, and then it's stored at the hard drives of Amazon in encrypted form with a new key. But of course, this key is a key Dropbox holds, and actually they only have one place to store it, namely at the same Amazon servers where they store your data. So you could argue that you didn't really gain anything. You could also look at the something which surprised me in terms of encryption. Only, I think it was a year and a half ago, did Amazon start in their APIs to support client-side encryption. There are probably a number of good reasons for that, but it still surprised me, the fact that what I would think was a natural strategy when you want to encrypt stuff that you move to a cloud service is I want to encrypt it at home. I don't want to transport it to them and then they can encrypt it with some key that they hold. I want to encrypt it myself. So the fact that a very large and maybe one of the biggest and most popular cloud services only started offering this very recently. I mean, to me that's surprising, and that shows some of an indication of what the state of the art is in terms of how you really can do practical crypto. When you talk about cryptography, there's this man. I mean, is there any cryptographers you know, Jakob? So he was a Frenchman. And in 1883, I think he wrote a book about how to build secure cipher systems for millisieverts. So he has one principle which is very famous in cryptography. It's called Jacob's principle. It's actually the second out of 6 principles, but never mind, the other ones are kind of outdated. You should be able to communicate it using the telegraph and stuff like that. But what he says is, when you build a crypto system, the algorithm should be public and only the key should be private. So this means that the algorithm itself is something that you put out there. People, they can look at it, they can see if they think it works, they can try to break it. But when you're actually using it, then it's not the algorithm itself which you need to protect, it's only the key that you seed it with when you're using it. And this, I think, this goes beyond crypto. And it also goes beyond the algorithms. For the algorithms part, I think it's not just the algorithm that needs to be open to review. Also the implementation of the algorithm. So if you're using RSA in a closed source form, I would like to see that source code. I would like to see if they implemented it correctly. I would like to see if they implement other features, other more advanced systems that are important for the security in my organization. I think it's problematic that very critical parts of your software system is not open for you to review, if that's the case, and that is many times the case. So I think if Jakob beyond crypto tells me that what you really need is that it's hard to build security if you're not willing to put it out to review. You're not able to see if there are any flaws in it, if there are any backdoors in it, and that type of thing. So, of course, this is not always possible. In fact, I would maybe argue that most of the time it's not possible. I think also maybe Lars in the afternoon is going to argue that maybe it's not all the time something you really want to do. There are new types of crypto which looks at this in other ways. But I think if you can't do it, then what? Then, I mean, you need to trust somebody. And if there's nobody you can trust, well, what you could do is that you need to apply some strategy. So what we do in some of our projects is that we apply what you could call a divide and conquer strategy. So if you're using cloud services, you don't rely on one, you're using multiple. If you're using consultants to write your security software, you don't just use one consultant house, you split it up maybe across different vendors. That may sound impractical, but if you're not willing to do the trust assumption, then you need to do something. This might be something which is actually feasible. In our lab, we've been working on a project where we're doing the same thing with crypto. So what you see up here with the small clouds in the middle is actually a system where we are building a key management system, which is based on some modern cryptography. But what it does is that instead of trusting one cloud provider to store data for you, we slice it up mathematically and distribute it across a number of providers. Of course, this is actually, today this is a very bad example because I chose 3 American providers and 2 of them are running on the same platform. So you would want to have something running on .NET, something running on Java or whatever people are using nowadays. And you would want them to run within the jurisdiction of different intelligence agencies, right? You want something in Europe, something in China, something in the US. Then it becomes much less likely that somebody actually compromises all of them at the same time, which is what's required to compromise a system such as this. So this is a concrete example where you take this divide and conquer approach and actually embed it into the system using novel types of cryptography. But as I said, I don't think this just applies to the system, I think it applies to many business practices as well. So another thing is, so do you know Panopticlick? You should try it out. So I tried it out yesterday. So there are 4 million people who tried this, and my browser is unique. Right? So it has a unique fingerprint on this service out of 4 million. It's just a regular Chrome. I have some add-ons or whatnot. I don't know. Because there's a lot of different configuration of my machine which is actually available to the service. So what you want to do, another classical security principle is what we call minimal disclosure. You want to disclose as little information as you have to, right? So, but when you're talking to other people, you want to communicate, you want to authenticate, and you can't really always encrypt your identity. There are technologies towards stuff like Panopticlick. You can use Tor and the Tor browser and whatnot, which will help you provide against part of this. But still, on top of this, today in Denmark, when you do secure communication with people, you can use NemID. But that is really, I mean, NemID is built to make it specifically easy to identify you. So if you want to reduce your footprint, then you need to use more advanced versions of systems like NemID. Again, there are projects going on around the world with something called anonymous credentials. Pilots are running right now, I think, in Sweden and Greece in some projects which involves, amongst others, both Microsoft and IBM. So there are novel types of crypto technology out there which can help you reduce these types of footprints. But overall, I think you need to think about it. Finally, the thing, which breaks all the systems is usability, right? So in the end, you make this very secure system, and then you give it to the users, and they push some other buttons, right? They don't push the button you told them to. So, there's a whole research area going on since I think it was 99. There was in the research world at least, a very famous paper called "Why Johnny Can't Encrypt," which was a case study of why people couldn't figure out using PGP. Which, if you're an IBM, everybody can encrypt, right? But when I'm communicating with our mother, it doesn't work. I tell her what to do, it doesn't work. So what I think we're seeing right now, and I think this is something, and when you're looking at solutions you want to use, you want to go for solutions which are automatic, which does as much as possible for you and for the user. My favorite example is password tools. I use a password tool because I can't come up with good passwords. If you want if you want a password which contains 128-bit entropy, which is what you need if you want to do some proper encryption, then you need something like 100 passwords. It's a lot to run around remembering, especially if you're on 100 different services. You use a tool for that. And that's, I think, something in terms of usability you want to go for, and you want to look for solutions which makes it easy for you to get the encryption, to get the authentication, to get the antivirus, to get all of these things out and running, also in the small companies, right? Where you don't have a specialized security person who can take care of that. Okay, I think my time's up, so thanks for your attention.